Hey, how you doing? This is ASAP, also known as Kodak. He be Crump, but my name is Josephus Wade. Josephus Kwame Wade, and I used to dislike my first name for the simple fact of everyone used to make fun of me as a kid about my first name, and I'm only telling you this because I'm trying to make a point. But one day someone pronounced my name the right way and they were like, "Do you know what your first name means?" And I was like, "No. All I know is it was some guy in the Bible, I assume. Because my mom told me she got out of the Bible." And they said, "Yeah, he is in the Bible, but his name was spelled Josephi. No, Hus. Mine is spelled Is. But I went and researched him and I found out he was a famous historian that lived during the time of Jesus. And he's written books about the Jews, and he's also written what he envisions to be heaven and hell. Now, as for me, um, I've read the Bible, and I agree that it is a very well constructed piece of work. But as a lot of people say, I don't think it's meant to be taken literally. As in, I believe the Bible has wisdom from someone who thought very deeply when they wrote. But I don't believe that all of the Bible is true. And the reason why I say this is because in order to learn, you have to be taught. But part of learning is also the first thing you learn as a baby is what's instinctual, which means what's encoded in your DNA. That's your natural thought process. I guess as it comes together and you hear people talk, then you realize that I guess you can talk. And that's when a kid observes everything. That's when your mind is literally a big question. Everything's a question mark to you. You want to touch everything, you want to feel everything. As we grow up and we begin to talk, we learn from others a language that is a very sophisticated piece of invention, basically. And we learn the world as it's been taught for generations and generations. My mom taught me what she learned from her mom, but left out the negative. My grandma taught her what she knew, but left out the negative. And so, me, I haven't had a very good life in the beginning, anyway. Um, I was exposed to a lot of negativity because that was what I grew up. That's all I knew. At the time, I didn't see it as negativity. It was ignorance because I wasn't taught better, because my mother wasn't taught any better, or didn't know how to. If she did know better, she didn't know how to apply what she learned. And I feel like as kids, we watch our parents more than our parents think. And I feel like when I have my son, I'm going to let him know off rip. Probably one of the first things that I teach him is you're not perfect. But I'm going to teach him that you are special. You are an individual. The way you think is not like the way anybody else thinks. The way I see the world is not going to be how you see the world, because you haven't seen the things that I've been through. But you have to learn to filter what you found to be true from what you don't know to be true. If there's knowledge, and then there's hearsay that passes down from generation to generation. No one knows the secrets of life. We go off of millions of years of research and things that have been found, but we still don't know where the human came from, whether it be Adam and Eve, like the Bible said, which I think that's just a literal term of creation. God created a man and a woman. God as in a being, or a piece of matter or energy, or it might not be as personal as we conceive it to be, is what I'm saying. Everyone sees God as this person because God created man in his own image. But who is to say that God's image isn't just matter, which everything is created of? And I know this because I have studied physics, trying to piece some of the mysteries of the galaxy together and come up with my own theories and prove whether they're right or wrong. But what I realized that is, as long as we continue to not teach our kids that no one's perfect, and if we don't focus on that no one's perfect, they're going to expect us to be perfect. And when we don't live up to those expectations, they're going to say, well, I do this because my daddy did it, and then you give them an excuse. You give them an excuse to do the same thing you did. You can't say don't drink and don't smoke, but yet you don't tell them why not to, what it does to your body. And if you can't even explain that to them when they're curious, all you're saying is don't do this. You're not giving an explanation of why not to. So when their friend says, try this, it's cool to smoke cigarettes, they're not going to be thinking, my parents told me not to, because they're wrong. Or they might think that, but at the same time, your friend says they're cool, and you've never seen your parents smoke cigarettes, so they never smoked it. How can they say don't smoke cigarettes? But if your parents say, I smoked it I tried smoking cigarettes, and they're bad for you. They just kill you. And you teach your kids the negative things as well as the positive. That's when they actually learn how to make decisions. They see flaws, the flaws in you, but being that you acknowledge the flaws in you and you teach them to strive for better, then that's when you start making changes. But at the same time, when with a person like me who I've grown up most of my life off just the little kid instinct. I did what saw other people do, and I was always into things, playing with something. I wanted to see how it was made, what made it, put it together. It went as far as me seeing a videotape and me seeing a piece of cheese and thinking that if I put the cheese in the VCR, it would play a cheese movie. I mean, different things were always something I just got into. I just always liked playing with everything I could possibly. I used to ask all kinds of questions, and a lot of times when I get into things, I get beating for it. But for some reason, that didn't stop me. If I wanted to know, I wanted to know, and even though I got beat, for some reason, my curious mind wouldn't settle for not knowing the answer to a question. And once I learned how to talk, I started asking a whole lot of questions. And I remember my mom used to get mad at me and say, "Stop asking so many questions." That's nothing I would never recommend you do for your child, because that was stupidity. To tell your kid not to ask you a question. If you can't answer the question, then you explain to your child that that's something you don't know. But at the same time, find out the answer, or attempt to find out the answer if the question is even answerable, and explain to them how you found the answer. Because for me, my dad, was my stepdad at the time, but at the time I didn't know that because he treated me like his son. But I asked him questions and he would never get mad. He always tell me what it is, what it was. I could ask him questions all day in the car. Dad, was that dude? Oh, it's for the speed. Dad, was that dude? It makes the car go forward. He even, would sit me in his lap as a kid and I steer the car. He was then instilling in me that anything I wanted to do, I could do. And he was really one of the biggest influences on my life, and who I'm glad was in my life to show me what a father was supposed to do and be like with his son, because I wasn't his real son, but I didn't know that, because he did everything a dad was supposed to do. Like, if I got in trouble at school, he would come and he would ask me why I didn't want to do it, and I'd tell him why, and then he'd tell me why I had to do it. And I didn't always understand it, but being that he was there doing it with me and showing me how to do it, I did it. Nowadays, parents don't go take part in their children's learning process. Me, I was in school and I hated to read. Ooh, I hated to read so bad. But I learned as much as I did learn to read at that time from me sitting at a table and me not wanting me reading, but every time I didn't attempt to say the word or got upset, he popped my hand with a pencil. And as a kid, I hated him for that. He was my dad, but I hated him for that. And now I love him for it because now I can't stop reading. And so he encouraged me to ask as many questions, to write good. He taught me repetition. And to this day, that's a person who I've been able to go through no matter what the situation is. And he says my door is always open. It's times where I didn't go because of pride and disappointment and things that I had done to him out of me being young and dumb and wanting to rebel against my parents. But it was something about him that he always, no matter what I had done, I could have just stole a pair of his pants and never came back with him. And then 4 weeks later, my mom would be like, your dad called, and I'd be like, which one? And she'd be like, your stepdad. And I'd call him and he'd be like, why you ain't came to see me? And he never held a grudge. If I did something wrong, he'd tell me it was wrong, and it never got brought up again. It was just like it was forgiven. But at the same time, anytime I bumped my head, he let me do what I wanted to do as a kid. But he made me do what I needed to do and told me what needed to be done. And he didn't just tell me when he was whooping me that he was whooping me for my own good or any of that. He would ask me, did I know it was wrong? And I'd say yes or no. And if I said yes, because most of the time he had already told me not to do it, and then I get a whooping. And he would tell me that, he would explain to me that he wasn't whooping me because he wanted to hurt me. He was whooping me so that I would do the right thing. And he made that known to me that for every action there's a consequence. And that was something else I learned. It's just these little its and bits and pieces that add up to success. In order to be successful, you have to change the way you think. You have to be open to new ideas, but you also have to have enough of your own mind to make your own determinations based on what you already know to be true. Some of the things you already know to be true can be as simple as a negative plus a negative equals a positive. That's all the way down to atoms. Opposites attract. That's all the way down to the very fabric of matter that everything is made up of. And that's true, I have found to be throughout everything. Why get mad about something you can't change? You raise your blood pressure and get angered and yell and cuss and scream, but all that shows is that you're not a very resilient person. because a resilient person is someone who's been through things but knows that has already noted that he can't change everything in the world. I don't think I can change everything, but those that are in my power to control, I will control to the fullest of my ability. You can't control what other people do, but you can control how you respond to situations in life. And negative plus a negative doesn't always equal a positive, as in math. But a negative plus a positive equals a positive, and a positive plus a positive is a positive. That's my own little saying. It's like negative thoughts equal negative actions, which equal negative outcomes. Positive thoughts, positive actions, positive outcomes. As long as we believe that people can change and believe that people can do better, but you don't just believe that, you hold yourself to that standard of what you believe a person should be. And once you take accountability and responsibility for your own actions and improve, then we begin to change the process. Once we get the negative thinking out of our family, that's when our family can become prosperous. But it's up to us to acknowledge our flaws in ourselves, because that's the only way it's gonna get better. You have to learn. I mean, I always learn things the hard way, and that's how, I guess, by learning the hard way, I always knew where the boundaries were. Because for some reason, I was the type of person who, I always had my own mind, and I never went with the crowd unless I wanted to go with the crowd. And I didn't really go with the crowd when I first started school, but that was fine because it was conducive to me. Like, to me, I was in school to learn, and when I started school, I loved school. I loved school all the way up until I got a bad teacher. So I love school, I love to learn, but as I got, hanging around the other kids and being around other people, you learn social skills, but as a kid, you don't have control of what other parents teach their children. And so you have to teach children at an early age that friends are going to be ever changing, but to be a loyal person is to always have friends. Because everyone wants to be around that person who influences them in a good way. Because even me now, when things were going negative in my life, it was because I hung around negative people who would talk negative thoughts from people who always had, I guess, negative thoughts. I believe that slavery had a impact on our people, but I think our people's inability to accept each other was the biggest issue. Because what I notice about other races that are more successful than the black race in America is that they will help each other out a lot more than African Americans will because of slavery. It's a good thing to be born in America, and I'm not saying I consent with slavery, but I know that everything happens for a reason, and that if slavery hadn't happened, I wouldn't be in America. I would probably want to be, but I'd probably be somewhere else. So there's a positive to every negative, and you have to remember that. As long as you remember there's a positive to every negative, then you begin to see change in your life. But if you believe everything negative will keep going negative, you will gravitate towards negative things because of your negative thoughts. And if all you think is negative and all you do is negative and all you say is negative, you are going to be a negative person. And you can't get mad at people for not wanting to be around you. I mean, you can't get mad, divorce, what have you. If it didn't work out, it's because either you or the person you were with failed. But if you give up on them, then you failed. But negative thoughts lead to negative actions, which lead to negative outcomes. And I know this to be true because when I was a kid, like I said, I didn't go with the crowd. I was a loner. I was a very imaginative kid. I used to play in the sandbox. It was my favorite thing. I come home covered in dirt. My mom would be mad, and my mom would tell me to stop playing in dirt, but I still play in the dirt. And for some reason, my mom, she used to get mad, but she never really got, she never really, I guess because she was so young, she had me at a young age, and she never really, I don't think, really knew what it was like to raise a kid because her parents were never there. Her, like my granddad, he went crazy, and my grandma, she basically worked to support all the kids by herself. So, and that led to my mom being very, I guess you can say, promiscuous. And, but she described it to me as her always looking for a father. And so the men she would choose, she would put in the place of her father as a replacement. And I guess being put up to those high expectations, you're guaranteed to fail. When we put our own stereotypes on people and block them off, that's when we stop learning, because we won't accept other people, and that's why we can't learn. Until we learn to accept others, we're not going to be able to accept ourselves. When we accept ourselves and love ourselves, then we can love and accept others. And when you love yourself, it's admitting to yourself when you're wrong, because you don't want yourself to make the same mistake. That means you actually have care for yourself, self-preservation. And to care about yourself is to admit that you don't know everything and that you're wrong. I'm a very prideful person, and that's something people have told me, and it's something I got from my real dad, because that was the only thing about him that I really liked, was the fact that he what I learned from my real dad, which I didn't meet till I was about, I'd say 8. My mom told me that my dad wasn't my real dad, that he was my sister's dad, but he wasn't mine. It was like it struck me by total surprise because every thought I could remember, from Christmas to birthdays to just being there, he was there. And my real dad, he was, as far as I knew, he never, as a kid, all you think is, I have a dad and I have a good dad, and now you're telling me he's not my real dad, he's my sister's dad. I felt betrayed, but not just that. I felt robbed. I felt like I had all my thoughts and memories of my dad had been taken away from me. I thought that I was going to lose him, and so I didn't want to meet this other guy. I didn't want him. I wanted the guy I knew. I don't know this guy. Who is this guy? And so just off that, of not being there and someone else taking your place, the kid already has in his mind what he knows as a father figure. And so if you don't fit at least close to what that kid has, first of all, the first thing you need to tell the kids why you weren't there. Don't lie. Because kids know when they're not being told the truth. Grown-ups think they don't know, but kids know because they know when something doesn't sound right. I always knew when grown-ups were lying. I just could never say it. And I guess I knew that because my mom was a very big liar, and I was a liar for the first part of my life until I learned better. But when I learned better, I stopped doing that. But a lot of that I can say I got from my real dad and my stepdad. But what I learned from my stepdad was, well, my real dad was, um, I guess, first time we went out, he, I guess he was kind of nervous, didn't know what to say. Me, I'm acting confined because I'm with a total stranger by myself, and I'm used to being with either my mom or my dad, and that's all I know besides school. So it's like I'm with this total stranger, and he asking me all these questions, and I'm answering because he had grown up, not because I want to, because really I didn't even want to be there with him. But over time, he bought me an outfit and some shoes, and I was happy, and I gave him, I say, a pretty good chance. Over time, we started warming up to each other. He asked me questions, but I still wouldn't. Some questions I couldn't answer, like, I'm your dad, and why don't you call me dad? When he asked me that, it was like, I guess, first thing that popped in my head was, that's somebody else's name. That's not your name. But I knew as a kid I couldn't say that. I just said I don't know, because I guess I was always taught respect for grown-ups, and I felt like if I didn't, I felt like if I would hurt somebody's feelings, I would rather not say it. And as a kid, if it was too complicated of a question, I'd just say I didn't know. I wouldn't answer. Even if I was in trouble, why'd you do it? I don't know. In actuality, I did it because I was trying to learn, or I wanted to have fun, or I thought, had an idea. It was a thought process that led up to that, but I didn't know how to explain my way of thinking to my mom because I didn't even get my way of thinking. Because as a kid, being ADD, your mind jumps from so many things that you're not like other kids at all. You more creative and more imaginative, more amped up and more everything. You're just everywhere. You have tons of energy. You want to run as fast as you can, and you feel like you have no limits. And over time, I got used to being around him and found out that he was pretty cool, but at the same time, I have this 8-year memory of this guy who I always considered to be my dad. And so from day one, that's all I know up till now. And it's kind of hard to warm up to even, because to show those emotions that a son has with his father, a son has to either never known a father at all, or I feel like they have that father-son connection. You have to be there from pretty far back. Even 2 or 3 is not too young. I feel like, but after the kids start talking and saying dada, and it's too late. Whoever there and is known as dada, that's gonna be dada in my heart, because that's who taught me how to ride a bike. That's who gave me my birthday presents. That's who was in school with me. Principal was called. He was there, and he wasn't upset to spend time with me and get off work. And he call off work just to sit in school with me. He'll say, I gotta go see about my son." And at the time, I didn't know why, I wasn't getting in more trouble than I was for the things I was doing, but he knew that I had to learn. I remember it was this one incident in Head Start, which is pretty young, and I had my first incident of bullying. It was this little Caucasian boy, and back then I had no knowledge of color at all because my parents didn't teach me like that. He kept picking on me, so I go home and I say, "Dad, this boy, he keep picking on me," because it got to the point where I tried to be cool with the boy, but then he was just too bothersome. Like, he used to always poke me and just stuff I didn't too much hang with anybody. So for you to come up to me and start, I was antisocial my whole life for some reason. It's like I would rather, I was always good at doing physical things. I wasn't good at relationships with people, or talking to people that were outside of my family. But anyway, I told him that the boy kept he kept poking me and messing with me. He said, "Tell the teacher." So next day I went in class, he started messing with me. I raised my hand and told the teacher, and she said, okay, I'll take care of it. And she didn't do anything as far as I know. I don't know if she talked to the kid, but all I know is he still was messing with me. So I went back home and I said, Dad, he's still doing it. And he said, whatever, if he hit you, hit him back. He poke you, poke him back. Whatever he do to you, you do it back to him. That was the first time I had ever been told to give somebody back what they was giving to me. That was the first time I had been taught an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And as a kid, I had a bad experience with it because the next time he picked with me, I still didn't want to mess with him. It was all the way up until the point where I had dealt with him all day and it was lunchtime and he kept poking me with his fork in the leg, just over and over, poking me in the leg with his plastic fork. And it was just getting irritating, and so I grabbed my fork and I poked him in the leg. But my fork wasn't plastic, it was metal. And at the time I didn't get that. I just poked him, and for some reason I must have had some recollection that it wasn't going to just come out. So I might have known the difference, but I don't think I intentionally meant to hurt him. I don't think that was my intent. I think that by the time I poked him, it was like, there you go. There's your fork. You can have it. And it was still in his leg, and he just raised his hand all calm. I'm surprised he was that calm about the situation, but I assume that he was probably in a home where he got either beat or had older brothers that were picking on him or something. I don't know. But he seemed to deal pretty good with the pain, so I'm assuming he had been beaten or something, because the fork was just sitting there in his leg, no lie. And first thing they did was they pulled me in the office and they asked me why I did it, and I said, because he poked me with the fork. I'm still not realizing the severity of the situation. I'm thinking he did it to me and I did it to him, and when he was doing it to me, no, he didn't get in trouble, but I'm getting in trouble. That's all I could think about. And so my dad came off work and they called him up to school, and I couldn't hear a lot of what was happening, but I heard the principal say um, he is exhibiting bad behavior, and it was like my dad stopped him right there. He was like, no. He was like, I told him to do that. He was like, I told him if he hit him back, because I told him to tell the teacher, and he said he told the teacher, and I believe him. And I know that he told the teacher. And so then they called the teacher up. Did he tell you that the boy was picking on him? And the teacher was like, yeah. And I didn't get in trouble. My dad, he didn't even mention it to me. It was like, it was okay. It was like, but the other parents, they were mad and they disenrolled their child from the school, and I'm assuming he probably attended public school for the rest of his life. But that was the first time I had actually gotten in trouble for hitting somebody. And that's just a little bit of where my roots come from on that. But as towards my real dad, when I stayed with him when I was older, when I got older, he actually took custody of me from my mom. Long story, but I'm sure we'll get to it. But this is what that taught me, because now I had met his wife before I moved in with him, but it was, the first impression, the girlfriend always tries to be nice to the kid, and she had a little stepdaughter, and she came out and she gave me a piece of candy. So I'm thinking, yeah, it's cool. I mean, I could get down with this. And it was like a couple days later, he asked me what I think about her after I met her, and I was like, she seemed nice, but as a kid, you don't really examine the person. You examine how what they let you see, because for some reason we like to hide our personalities from kids, and that's not good. We actually set them up for failure when we don't show them who we really are, because even though I learned that she wasn't that nice person who she portrayed herself to be, it for him to ask me, I said yes because I had no recollection of how she really acted. To me, when I was little, everyone was nice. This is My parents were good people, and I assumed everyone else was until the bullying incidents at school. But I still assumed that most people were positive from the first moment I met them, and that is something I have changed, but I still believe to a certain extent. And how I explain that is, I believe all people have good in them and have potential to do good, but I believe all people have different ways of thinking and different ways of learning things. And so at the time, everything I learned was pretty much only got a whooping if I really did something wrong. Like my parents, they would find out who did it, and if they didn't know who did it, everybody got a whooping. And the point of that was, if you knew that he did it and you let him get whooped, your conscience should get you. And that if you weren't man enough to admit that you were wrong, then you would suffer with a, your sibling, which taught us that we were supposed to look out for each other, basically. So if my sister fell and I allowed her to fall, it's my fault as well. And that's something that I believe that kept me and my sister close. Even though we had our differences and fallouts, we always remained close because our parents made us remain close. But um when you enter a new environment different from the environment you're used to, you are you analyze everything. And me, I analyzed everything. They seemed nice. Everyone had a great smile on their face and very welcoming. But as time passed, their their personality flaws start to shine through. And I don't feel like you should introduce your kids to people with habits or negative, or at least you should be around them when they're in the vicinity of the person. Until a kid is old enough to understand, I don't think they should be subjected to it before they're old enough to understand what it is. And all I knew was I went from a place I was totally accepted to a place where I didn't know anyone and everybody wanted to conversate with me, but I was, like I said, antisocial. I had to warm up to people. I had to know how you reacted to what I did before I did it. And I guess one of the first red flags that made me not accept them as people was the fact that they tried to force me to try new things, which wasn't me. I had to warm up to things, and then after I warmed up to them, then I do it more often. Like I had only owned a rabbit when I was 6, which I took care of pretty well. I've always been an animal lover, but this was the first time I had seen this specific animal. I never met anyone with it, and I was scared of it. And it was a cat. And it's stupid to me now, but as being a kid and not knowing what it was, yes, I was scared of a cat because I've never seen one, never known anyone with one. And they were weird to me, but they, no matter how skittish I acted or jumped back, they would make me pet the cat. And I don't think that's the right thing to do. As a like a like two animals, you have to let the animal either initiate with the other animal or me. If I try to call an animal and it doesn't come to me, I assume that it doesn't respond well to my vibe or my energy. And anyway, I had to get over the cat thing quick because her his wife's mom had like 32 cats and 3 dogs. And I like being over there because like it was different from what I was used to. I was used to being able to just walk into the refrigerator and get whatever I wanted, but here I didn't feel comfortable because it wasn't my house, and I still feel like that to this day. I will not go in someone else's refrigerator unless they absolutely make me. They could say, make yourself at home, all that, but I can't because it's not my home, and I know it's not. It's your home. People say that to be nice, but at the end of the day, if you're not going to let me spend the night, don't say make yourself at home. That's how I feel. Or if you don't want me eating your last chili burrito, don't don't even offer it. But anyway, so that was my first negative response to them. But y'all gonna have to rush the next video ASAP, breaking me down my mental process. Yeah, so and she did try, to welcome me into their family, but it's like it was certain things that they would point out about when I would speak. Like I would say street instead of street, and it's like to point that out to me as a kid when I felt like even though they were giving me constructive criticism, I had never been criticized. I had been punished and told the right way to do things, but to me that was to me to be criticized by someone I don't know is to tell me you're not you're not good enough. That was my first response. Because if a kid is not used to you and he's just learning to communicate with you, the last thing you should be worried about if he hasn't said too much since he's been here is whether he says street or street. I mean, it's something you can touch on after y'all build a relationship, but you just coming into the relationship and criticism, yeah. Try not to criticize your kids for doing things wrong. It would be okay for her to say, "Don't you mean street?" and actually help me pronounce it, but to say no, that's wrong, or you're doing that wrong, and that's something they did all the time, and that's a reason why I disliked them because I felt like before I even had time to judge you, you've already judged me. And as far as that goes, it was like things like I talked to their stepdaughter. We kind of were cool at first, and then it was like I tried to find things we had in common, and it's like I said one day, "Do you watch I Love Lucy?" which is a show I watched because my parents allowed me to watch whatever was on, and she was like, "No, she doesn't watch that." Her mom answered for her, which I don't think anyone should do either. I don't think you should yell at a kid for asking a curious question and then criticize the show just because you don't agree with your kids watching certain television. That's not, if you don't agree with them watching it, they're gonna grow up and they're gonna watch all kinds of crazy stuff because you wouldn't let them watch it. Yeah. I learned some of the best things from watching TV. It helped create my imagination. My dad let me watch a lot of movies, and I didn't even realize movies weren't true stories until like I got old enough to watch like Power Rangers and yeah, but I always thought movies were real when I was little. I mean, there's certain things my parents wouldn't let me watch, but as a kid, being as curious as I was, and you can't stop a curious kid. You just have to tell them what it is and tell them whether it's right or wrong, and they'll accept that. But not tell them, to leave me with a question was like to ask me to find the answer myself. That was me. If I wasn't allowed to touch it, I wanted to know why I wasn't allowed to touch it. And when I get the chance, I still would go touch it because that was me. And that's why I ask asking a lot of questions. That was the first route to my success. me asking a lot of questions and my parents answering them. And being that they allowed me to have my own opinion and to make mistakes and learn from 'em, I learned skills that most kids don't learn until like they're a lot older than I was. So being that her mom didn't let her watch I Love Lucy and all that, she used to ask me strange questions like, where do babies come from? And she said it was just her mom told her that they came from the stork, and my mom told me they came from her. So somebody's lying. And kids do that. When they get together, they ask each other questions and they put together the answers. And if the answers don't match up, they know they've been lied to. All kids do it. And the kids, parents who let their kids know that the earlier they know, the more influence they have on stopping other people from telling them something wrong. But people who let the kids find out on their own, they grow up knowing, okay, my parents are gonna lie to me, so I'm gonna have to find out on my own. But when you teach your kids, anything you ask me, I'm going to tell you the truth about, or tell you you're not old enough to know that yet. At least give them an answer they can fathom in their head, and not some bullshit where their friends gonna tell them and they're gonna realize their parents are liars, even though they tell them not to lie. That's when you start to give your kids your flaws. When you break that innocence, that state of innocence, where you go against something you tell them. That's why I say all kids should know that no one's perfect. And I'm going to tell my kids no one's perfect. But I'm going to tell them what I do right and where I have flaws. I'm going to tell them about my past and how I was as a kid. I'm going to relate to them on a level because that's how my dad did me. He came down to the level I was on, and whatever I asked, that's how he responded. But if ever I was falling behind in something, he made sure that I caught back up with other kids. And that's something most kids my age didn't have. I know my cousins probably didn't have that, but my cousin still turned out to be a pretty smart cat. He just needs that positive influence in his life, that person that tells him, hey, you can do that. You can make it happen. And that's what I needed. Instead, I had people telling me that everything I had learned was wrong and that I was behind because I couldn't read as well as their daughter, who was in the same grade as me, because I stayed back in the third grade because I had a bad teacher. And a bad teacher will make a kid fail in their best subject. My best subject was math. I loved numbers. They were simpler to me than words. And when I got to the third grade, that's when classes got bigger and there was less one-on-one attention. So teachers tend to go over it, and if you don't get it, it's like have your parents help you with it on homework. And my dad was separated from my mom, and my real dad, he didn't live in the household. My mom, she was like us. She was a kid trying to figure out how to raise some kids. And so she made mistakes, but it was through her mistakes that I also learned how to accept mistakes and keep going. Because no matter what happened, she kept going. No matter what problems she would face, she kept going. And that, her determination, even though she would get a job and be good on a job and quit or get fired because of some bull, and we might go without, she would get another job. It wasn't we go without like stuff we wanted. We never had everything we wanted, but we had everything we needed because my dad made sure of that. And my mom, she would ask my dad if he had the money, he'd give it to her. Even though they were divorced or separated at the time, he he took care of us, me and my sister, even though they weren't together, and even though I wasn't his. He felt like his wife had me, so I was his son too, and he treated me like that. It was nothing that would have led me to know he wasn't my father, because as far as a father goes, he was pretty good at it. Pretty good at it. And he's really who I say molded me to be a learner. Because if he wasn't in my life, I probably wouldn't have got answers to my questions and would have stopped asking questions, which happened later on in life, but we're going to get that. The beginning stage of a kid's life is important. My sister would get toys, and my dad made sure that if it was my birthday, she got a toy, and if it was her birthday, I at least got one present to unwrap. And that was something he did to never put one above the other. He did the same with both. He whooped us the same. We got in trouble for the same thing. He didn't treat us any different. And that's why my sister is successful too, because she realizes that she can do whatever. Because we both been raised in the environment that wasn't the best. With her dad, who I call my dad, we were in a positive environment, but when we were with my mom, it was not so positive. That's when I learned the wrong things, I guess. I don't think my mom was, I don't think it was intentional. I think she was just too young. She had me and my sister. My sister, she had 15 and me at 16. She was just too young to really be raising us by herself. But she actually got kicked out from by my grandma for getting pregnant with my sister, and she told us she was either gonna get an abortion or my dad was gonna marry her, and my dad did marry her, and that didn't work out because my mom wanted to be on the streets, I guess. She wanted to still be a kid, and he stayed married to her, separated for most of my childhood until I was about 15. I think they got It's a divorce. But I think he still loved her and he wanted to be with her, but he wanted to wait until she learned about life. And by the time she learned, it's I'm 20 and it's like I'm trying to teach my mom, and I don't give up because I feel like maybe I can be the staff that brings some peace to my family. Because as I succeed and people see me do better and want better and reach for better in life, they want that for themselves too. And that's mostly why I succeed. Because when I was in third grade, it was the first time a teacher actually. That's why I failed the third grade because I got moved. I was moved around schools a lot because my mom moved around a lot. So I was always good at making friends, but I was never good at keeping them. That's why I've been antisocial for a minute. So I never really hung around with other kids except my cousins. And when I hung around with my cousins, we they was just as bad as me. So we got into more trouble. And anyway, so yeah, I forgot where I was going with that. But as a kid, I'm gonna have to stop this to see where I was. Like I was saying, in third grade was the first time a teacher had actually discouraged me, and that was, I think she was trying to give me constructive criticism, but I never responded too good to constructive criticism. I've always took taken it as you saying I wasn't good enough, or but basically she told me that I was going to be an old man in the third grade. Maybe that wasn't the best thing for her to say, but I believe she did it to try to scare me, but it didn't work. I just took it as a joke, and I did my best throughout school. And third grade is when I really had the most problems moving around and all that. So around that time, my dad was coming in, my real dad was stepping into the picture and taking me to school, and I was seeing him more often. And he, at the time, was dating someone who wasn't. This was before the stepmom came along, but she was a nice lady. I like her. Like she welcomed me into her house. She never had anything bad to say about me. At the time, I stayed like up the street from their house, so I could like walk there when I wanted to. She had a son, and I looked up to him because he was older than me, and it was the first time I actually at least felt like I had a big brother, someone older to hang out with. And he was, I guess, the average 12, 13-year old, maybe older. But we had fun when it was just me and him. We play games and stuff, and we had fun. But when like his friends would be in the picture, he would like, I guess they would say, "Who's that little boy?" And he said, "Oh, that's my mom boyfriend's son." And that's when I just felt like unwelcome, and that's when I leave, or I'd attempt to play with them, and they'd go somewhere away from me. So it was like I was with most other kids besides my sister. I was used to either being by myself or getting rejected. And so that's something I've had a lot of in my lifetime. Not just by my, not just by random kids that were new to me, but by sometimes my aunties and cousins and basically everyone from my mom's side was pretty much violent because they got raised by their sisters and brothers who whooped them and they whooped their kids like that. Like my auntie, she was very well. I had two. My auntie Beverly, she was very mean to me as a kid, but I think it was because she knew I was better. She just didn't want me to. She didn't have any kids of her own, so I guess she didn't really know how to deal with kids. But she used to pinch me, and I used to hate it. I used to hate getting pinched. And she'll tell us to comb her hair, and at first it was cool to play in her hair. Then after a while, it got irritating because it was like an everyday thing. But I did it no problem because just so she liked me. Anytime she asked me, I would do it so I could maybe get on the good side and get away with doing something later on. But it's like once I knew I was gonna get in trouble, I did the right thing. Like if I got into something I wasn't supposed to get into and I got pinched by her, I knew that I couldn't do anything else. I just sit there. I might be bored out of my mind, and that was my biggest problem. I would never sit still, and I was always into something because I hated being bored. To me, I always had to be thinking about something, and that's how I've been my whole life. I've always had something on my mind or been bored and wanted something on my mind. I remember it's it wasn't a time where didn't think about anything until like when I started staying with my dad, my real dad, and he was never really there, so I would chill with his wife and stepdaughter, which I think her stepdaughter was like spoiled, and me, I wasn't spoiled at all, and so it was certain things about her that I realized that she would use her spoilness to her advantage because she realized that they would talk about me and they would talk like she was smarter than me, so she would assume she was better than me, and so she would say that, and they would literally confirm it in front of her by telling me that I was not as advanced as she was on reading or that I said a word wrong, but when it came to math and science and any social studies, she couldn't touch me in none of that. But reading and writing have always been my weak subjects until I got older, and now they are becoming slowly but surely my strongest subjects. But I realized how spoiled kids were. Things like the respect that I had for grown ups, her parents hadn't taught her that respect. Like I would my mom would tell me not to talk when grown folks are talking, or I would be asked to leave the room if something was being said that they felt like was too young for my ears, and they hadn't taught this to this stepsister of mine. She was allowed to interrupt her mom during conversations, and she was allowed to uh, be in their ear when they were talking about things, and they would talk loud enough where even if you weren't in the room, you could hear them. And that's when I heard them one day, because I had already been criticized by these people and told that their daughter was better, and she acted like way different than I was used to. Like she was more materialistic than I was. And I heard her mom one day say something negative about my mom. And at the time, she had never met my mom, but I think one time, and they talked, and I think my mom said, either my dad said, she came to pick me up one day, and I went and got my stuff, and they were talking, and my mom was like telling her, how, uh, just making casual conversation. I can't remember word for word, but it was something about how her daughter had pretty hair and this and that, girl stuff. And she talked to my mom like they made conversation like you would have thought they were best friends. That's how I took it. But then I guess she got information from my dad that was not highly accurate, I would say, about my mom. Talking about uh, how she just sat on her ass all her life and collected food stamps and things that I had taken personal, because I seen my mom struggle to feed us and to get us half the things that her daughter was given to by her grandparents. And it got to me because if my mom had had as strong as a support system as her mom did for her, then maybe my mom wouldn't have had to be on food stamps. Maybe if my granddad hadn't went crazy, and it's like people criticize people without knowing the full extent of what the situation is. When I look at a person, I don't see a situation. I see a person, because I've been judged and stereotyped all my life, so I try not to stereotype people. And that's hard when you realize that within the first 5 seconds, everyone always has their preconception of a person within the first 5 seconds of seeing them. And so it's like, where I'm from, that was a stereotype. Baggy pants, sagging, that was gangsta or ghetto. And that was another thing that I didn't like about them. The fact that everyone where I'm from wore their clothes a certain way. Not because that's how we dress, but that's how our parents dressed us, because that was a style. But we would be judged on how our parents dressed us. And it's like parents dress you in a style that is a fad, I guess, because they know that if they don't, if my mom knew that if I didn't have on Jordans, that I would be picked on. Not of because she was poor and she knew what it was like not to have name brand clothes and to get picked on and to feel like you didn't fit in. She just made sure that I wasn't picked on, and that's why a lot of parents will dress their kids in the fatty clothes because that's what mattered to them, and that's a cycle that needs to be broken. I feel like children need to be taught to save their money, and parents should shouldn't buy the kids something just because they want it. I feel like they should do something to earn those shoes if that's what they want. There should be some level of if you want better, you have to work harder and then you get better. But with me, it was more of a I get better because I didn't even know back then shoes didn't matter to me. Like my cousins, they knew all the shoes when they first came out, but I wasn't a shoe person, and I guess my dad wasn't a shoe person, so I didn't. I like not brand new shoes, but I didn't care about the name brands. But I noticed the difference between when my dad was not with his current wife and then when he got with her. Now, that wasn't, I guess I was seeing less of him and more of her, and that wasn't good for me, I think, because I came to see him, not her, and it was him I had to establish a relationship, but I was establishing a relationship with her, her daughter, and her mother, which you can't expect a kid to come into a new environment and know you as being the person who's supposed to be his real dad, but your wife and stepdaughter spend more time with your child than you. Cause it was like he worked, so I mean that was a good influence to watch him go to work and see him take care of his wife and kids and stuff. That was a positive influence, but to also see him spend more time with his wife when he was off work, that kind of, you gotta look at the situation. There's a guy who has 8 years in the hole on you, and you have 3, and people I don't know, and you are spending more time with them than me, and I'm spending more time with them than you, and what's the point of me being there? That's what I don't get. I already had a mom. I didn't need another mom. I needed a dad. But I didn't need a dad for real because I had a dad. I just got stuck with the wrong dad. And it kind of makes me wish he had never even came back because what I was doing at his house was not conducive to me. It was not, because I was being secluded from my family. once he took custody of me. Because, let me tell the whole story. So, my mom took me to stay with him, and she was like, I'm gonna leave you here with your dad for a while because I'm falling on hard times and I want to keep you, but I can't right now. And so she left me with a suitcase, and she told him that she was coming back in a week, but she knew it was gonna be longer than that. And he I think he kind of knew it was gonna be longer than that too, because it was a suitcase basically full of all my clothes, which they ended up getting rid of most of them and dressing me either like in, I guess, casual clothes, not the hood attire I was used to wearing and seeing all the time. And so I don't remember too many conversations with my dad at that time. I just remember like laundromat conversations where I asked a question like, what if you could put a cord on a string and drop it in the laundry thing and pull it back out? And then that's when he told me that he asked me why was I always looking for a way to scheme. And me, for as a kid, it was just a general idea. Not, I didn't think about, that someone had to make money off of the laundromat. I just knew that it was somewhere you came, put your money in, that the clothes had to get washed. I remember my mom washing clothes, and I remember sometimes we used to have to pick up cans to wash clothes. That's why. And he was like, you should work hard for your dollar and not try to scheme it. And that was the first thing I can remember that he told me that really stuck out of my mind, as him actually teaching me something. Even though I was learning from him anyway, because, I mean, he was my real dad. Of course, I was going to pick up after a while on his habits. And I think the first time I got a whooping by him, I don't remember what it was for, but I think it was for getting kicked. I got suspended from school. Yeah, that was the first time I got a whooping. So school started and he got all the paperwork, and I remember I went with him, and he was saying, you gonna do good in school? And I was like, yeah. Because my goal was to, of course, prove that I was as good, or if not better than my stepsister, which I felt like was his goal too, to prove that I was capable of being smarter than what people give me credit for. And I never really been compared to someone else before that, but that's when I learned that it was a competition, and whoever played the game the nicest was automatically gonna win. That's just, I mean, of course, I wasn't gonna be their favorite. I was everything they envisioned, and instead of accepting who I was and teaching me better, they criticized and allowed their daughter to criticize, not knowing she was criticizing. But I remember one time she wanted to teach me how to read a book. And I was like, no, I don't want to read the book because I'm the type of person, my pride was something big for me. If I had trouble doing something, I didn't do it. If I was good at it, I did it, and I did it often. But that was the first time I was asked by someone my own age, a girl at that, to read a book, and I told her no. And then so she called her grandma and told her grandma that basically I wouldn't read the book, and she was trying to help me learn how to read. And her grandma was like, well, tell him if he don't read, then when he get his report card back, I won't give him any money if he got A's. And at that time, I was used to not having money anyway. I was born not having money. My mom gave me money every now and then, but I used that to buy what I wanted to. And at that time, I wasn't. I had to pick my side, and my side was my mom, and I knew they didn't like her, so they were against her and they were against me. That's how I took it. So I shrugged my shoulders, and she said, well, he said he doesn't care. And that's not what I said, but she automatically believed her granddaughter instead of me, of course. But when parents choose favorites or allow their kids to choose favorites, I can see how that affects the kid negatively. That's why my mom, her sisters and brothers weren't as tight knit in helping because the my grandma, she chose favorites, and she did that because her dad chose favorites. And down generation to generation, that trend just happened. There's always the kid who's trying to live up to mom's expectations, and the baby of the family who usually gets it just because they're the baby and they were the last born. And everybody wants that attention and craves that attention, but no one gets it but the baby. And that's what I went through after I got my mom got pregnant and had a brother, and so I had a brother, and that was my brother. I mean, at the time, I was just happy to have another little brother, and I wanted to teach him everything that I knew that was positive, and I feel like that was taken from me by my father by not allowing me to speak with my mother. And that also affected my mother negatively because she felt like it was her fault that he actually got custody of me, but it wasn't actually her fault. It was actually my grandma's fault. My grandmother had got the letter and made up her own decision that I would be better off without my mom and didn't tell her about the letter. So she missed the court date and they awarded him custody off her missing the court date. And so it didn't matter that she was in Atlanta. That was the last known court date, and I didn't find out till after after a while, cause after being there for a minute, one day my mom came and visited me, and she had a rental car, and she was doing better, and she had lost weight, doing very very better. And I told her the situation that I didn't like them and how they treated me and how I just wanted to be with her again. And she had actually just came to visit me and told them that she would be back with me. And I told her I didn't want to go back. And she said that that this was the time in my life where I needed to just be with my dad. And I didn't get that because I knew that he wasn't my dad to me. He was her husband and his stepdaughter's stepfather. Like he treated probably was a better stepfather than he was a father to me. And it's like I don't know, I felt like it would be situations where like she would like call my name like I was bothering her, and I wouldn't be bothering her, but I'd get yelled at for it. And it's like she knew that anything she did, that I would automatically get blamed for it if she played her cards right. Cause I mean, you, the boy is always figured to be messing with the female, and being that I was from, uh, I guess from the ghetto, I was treated like ghetto shit. Like basically, like I wasn't as educated because I didn't talk like them. I wasn't as insightful. That I was weaker, and sometimes I started to believe that because she would she would make me feel like that, and her mom and her grandma would make me feel like that, and they tell me that basically brag about her honors, and if she got honor roll, it was like blasted in front of my face, like I guess their thought in it that I would be upset that a girl was beating me, and that wasn't my concern because I knew she was book smart, but I knew I was way smarter than her on a lot of other levels, like survival skill level stuff that you can only get in the hood. And it was something about being poor that I didn't need things I was less expensive to buy for. And they realized that, so they bought me less expensive shit. Then when I started getting in middle school, which was I was finna be held back in fifth grade because I was going to her school, which was her daughter's school, which was like public slash private, kind of a public type uniform, khaki shirt, uh, baby blue shirt, khaki pants, uniform every day, and that was so weird to me. Like I never been to school like that where kids just walked in a line straight and stood completely still, and it was like they were like super kids. I mean, I was just I always stood out. That's how I looked at it. being that I was antisocial anyway, and they knew her, they just automatically knew me as her stepbrother. And that's how it was all through the little fifth grade year. I get in trouble for just doing the normal things that I would do at school, or that I wouldn't get to do at home, but I would normally do at had I been in my comfort zone. So I got in trouble for hanging with bad kids at school and getting in more trouble. I remember one time, this girl in the cafeteria threw something on my uniform. And me remembering what my dad always told me, someone hit you, hit him back. I threw food back at her. And before you know it, we was throwing food back and forth. People were passing us food to throw. It was a food fight. My first food fight, which I was pretty excited about because I always seen them on TV, but I never got to do it. But I did it then, and it was like our uniforms were dirty, and instead of the same response I got from my dad, he, from my real dad, when the fork incident, I took it as the same incident. Instead of he, instead of me being cool because I was defending myself, it was like he was more mad that he had to get off work and that I got suspended, and instead of taking up for me and saying she threw it at him, so he threw it back, and pushing that issue, it was like he agreed with the principal that I get kicked out of school. And to me that was weird because like my mom and my dad would always come to the school, my real dad, who I think, who I call my real dad. I know y'all getting confused, but the guy who raised me, who I call my father, came up to my school, and anytime they came up to my school, it was to solve the problem. It wasn't, it was never my fault, per se. If it was my fault, they would work with me and ask me why I did this and why I did that, and took more caution. It took more caution into the fact that I had ADD, and my dad, instead of accepting the fact that I had ADD, he took me off of the medicine, saying that it was just bullshit, basically. Even though it made me concentrate, it made me, I was gonna get grades on it, he said it made me like a zombie. But with me, it just made me think more clearly and better. I felt like I could concentrate on one thing, and without it, it was like I was looking at schoolwork, but I was thinking about my cousins and my brothers and my sisters, and I couldn't focus on my schoolwork. I was too busy focusing on the things I was missing out on, things I missed. And so I get in trouble for acting out and suspended constantly from Westwood Heights Elementary. It was the school I got suspended for the most, and I had only been suspended from school like once before that. So that's when I started to hate school, because that was the first time I felt like no one was taking up for me and no one cared whether I was learning or not. They were more concerned about whether they had to get off work because the principal got called. And that's when I realized that it was all about putting on the show. As long as things look good, it didn't matter that they were wrong on the inside, as long as it looked good to everybody else. And that's what I learned from my father. As long as it looked good, you good. I mean, he taught me other things like having different trades, and he made me work on cars with him, and that's something that I hated to do because not because I didn't like working on cars with him, but because when I didn't know what something was, he'd get mad, or if I can find something, he'd get mad and say, "You didn't look for it." I looked for it, but I'm a kid. I mean, there's only a certain. I'm gonna look on top, and I'm gonna look under a couple things, but that's it. That's a kid's mind frame. A kid doesn't think it's on here, I'm gonna find it. A kid thinks I don't know what he's looking for, and if I brought the wrong thing, he'd get mad. And it just got to the point where I was tired of him getting mad at me and yelling at me about stuff that I just stopped going out. If he asked me out, I wouldn't want to go. And then it got to the point where he'd make me go, say I gotta come out anyway. And I guess those were the times I remember with him. Him either yelling at me or yelling at them. And anytime he did say something good, but it was like it was like he was telling me, but it was like I didn't feel any like he was telling me because he wanted to, but he was telling me because he had to. And that's what I felt like. I felt like he was always doing it for his self. I don't ever feel like it was for me. I felt like it was for his conscience and for his pocketbook, and it was rarely times when he would stand up for me. It was like that was always right, and I was always doing this wrong, and I was always doing that wrong according to his stepwife, his wife. And it was times when a teacher would come out to the car, which her grandma picked me up from school, but her teacher would come to the car and say that I was a good student, although I should apply myself more. And then she would tell them that I wasn't the teacher said I wasn't doing my work, and which was total opposite from the truth. But I get woken up with a whipping for that. And it was like he would ask me for my side of the story, but when I would give it, it didn't seem to be sufficient of enough answer. It was always a whipping, a beating, and that's the only thing I ever remembered was him telling me what he wanted me to do and whipping me. Never was it ever incited of, well, is he happy or is there a reason you're acting out? No, it was always he's bad or he isn't doing this or he isn't doing that, and it was like obey or get beat to death. I mean, what do you do say under those odds? There you're gonna do right, but you're not doing right because you want to do right. You're doing right because someone wants you to do right. I don't feel like you should make your kids do right. You should give them the option to do right. Or tell them right from wrong when they're young to the best of your knowledge from the ground up about how to act from just like you're a kid. You gotta get on their level. If you don't level with a child, the child's never gonna trust you if you don't give that child a reason to trust you. Especially in a situation where I don't know you, I haven't known you, and I come and I see you a couple times, okay, and then all of a sudden I'm living with you and you don't communicate with me like my mom does. I talk to my mom 24/7 all day. That's who I'm used to being around. I'm used to communicating with my parents, like having deep conversations with my parents. I couldn't communicate with his stepwife because she didn't like my mom, and that's what I missed. And she didn't like my mom, he didn't like me, and then the constant criticism, and it was just, it was always with me like I had to live up to her daughter, or I wasn't gonna be anything, or I wasn't gonna get into college, and I wasn't gonna do this, and I wasn't gonna be able to get a job without a GED, with a GED, and all this other. It was just always me failing with them. It was always me not doing good enough, or could have done better, or every student is not a student. Every student has the potential to be a student if they're trained in the right way, if they're taught the right way. But if they're discouraged and sensitivity isn't given to the specific child, and they're being compared to another child, and being having things that you gave to them out of supposed love for them taken away from them because of uh, academic issue or struggling they're having, to a kid that feels like, okay, if to me, I didn't get the fact that you didn't. To me, I never had a game system, or I had one game system, and that was one that got broken. It was whatever. I'm not used to having a whole lot of nice things, and that wasn't important to me. So, what was important to me was my family and feeling loved and wanted. That was what was important to me. But instead of giving me the loving and caring that an actual parent would have given me had they known me from birth, just out of raising me and changing my diapers, that natural bond you grow with the child. This man hadn't had it with me because he wasn't there. And he only had one other son who he wasn't there for. So I felt like, out of respect to his family, asking about where I was and how I was doing, that's why he felt obligated to me. That because it was this family image that had to be painted so picture pretty, but even his wife didn't live up to his expectations, and he get mad at her, and they get to fighting. And I never really seen him hit her until, like, I don't know. it was one day where, um, I mean, it'd be times where we suspected, me and his daughter, and we both get upset about the situation, both of us, and she would be next day have a scar or bruise and try to cover it up and lie about it. And to me, that's when I lost respect for him, because I realized that he, I mean, I felt like she got what she deserved, because she used to lie to get him to beat me, and here she was getting beat by him, asking me to help, and I felt no obligation to her, because I felt like if you didn't at least one time say, well, maybe you shouldn't whoop him, maybe you should try talking to him, or at least she tried talking to me and attempted to accept me, then maybe I would have accepted her. But to criticize me off rip, that was like, and I guess why it was so vivid to me, and that's when I hated him, because I realized that he was a woman beater, and that's what I had witnessed growing up. I seen my mom get beat by her boyfriend and go back to him and get beat by him and go back to him and get beat by him again. And I would call the police when I saw it, and he got mad at me for that. And so I remember one time he never really said anything to me, and that's what, as a kid, let me know that you didn't care about me. And I feel like if a person can't accept your kids, then they can't really love you. Because if I can't love a part of you because you had that part with somebody else, then I don't really love you as a person. Because if I was to accept you, I would accept the decisions you made and that came along with them. And so that's what I remember. That's when I connected him with my actual dad. So by the time I had saw that he was basically the same type of person that my mom was talking to, that would beat her, and that's why I had lost all respect for him, because I felt like any man that put his hands on a woman was a sorry individual, and that's how I feel to this day. And that's why no matter how mad I've gotten at a female, I will never put my hands on a female, because I remember how I felt as a kid seeing a dude hit on my mom, and I wanted to kill him for that. Like, if I had I don't know, I just wish that he would die. And I called the police on him, and he got mad about it, and he whooped me with a switch one day, because I wanted to go where my mom was, and he didn't want me to go in there, and so he whooped me with a switch. And I was mad about it, but I ain't say nothing to him or my mom. But when my dad came, I told my dad about it, and my dad confronted him, and my father confronted him and told him to never put his hands on me, and that he was a punk and all kind of other stuff that I heard. But he got mad about it, but he never put his hands on me again till like 13. And by that time I was I was a runaway by then, so it was like I didn't care no more. I had been used to getting beat and violence, and that's all I knew. So he put his hands on me and grabbed me like he was bad, and I, I put my hands on him like I was bad. Except mine had more anger behind them. But yeah, I gotta get ready for work, so I'm gonna do another video when I get off.